Hello, everybody. This is Charles Calhoun, aka the Shade Tree Pro. Once again, as I tell you, I'm operating under the Shade Tree out of the Marriott Grand Vista in Orlando, Florida. Remember, if you want to get in touch with me, go to Charles at shadetreepro.com, send me a message, and we'll discuss lessons and prices. But today I'm going to talk about something that I find very interesting. Just like golf is a representation of life in a sense, and then life imitates golf. It's kind of how it goes. As they said, Harvey Penick once said that you could find more about an individual in one round of golf than a lifetime of dinner parties. I mean, golf does expose us. But what I'm going to talk about today is this. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember when your life changed? Do you remember that moment when you was maybe, you put away the toys and you had to become a man? Well, I remember mine. And mine's happened when I was in college. And I call it the 327 story and the ramen noodles. Now, what's interesting about that, when I was in college, I went to Marshall University. I come from a good family, money wasn't no big issue in a sense. So, I was enjoying myself, having a great time. I actually had a place that was off campus. So my grandparents were paying my rent. So, I was enjoying myself in college or whatever. I wasn't failing. I was doing, my grades were okay or whatever. But I think the way that my grandmother and my grandfather raised me, that they knew that I wasn't giving my best. I knew I wasn't giving my best. I was just living that life. Why? Because my grandmother and my grandfather was paying my rent. Everything was just, just copacetic. I was just loving life. But then all of a sudden, this what happened. It was like 2 weeks before I would normally get my check from my grandmother, $327 to pay my rent. But so all of a sudden, those 2 weeks it came and I didn't get that check. So I called my grandmother and I said, Big Ma, I called her Big Ma. I said, Big Ma, I didn't get my check. Well, Big Ma said, well, I'm not sending you a check this month. What? She said, well, I'm not, I'm done paying your rent. I was like, what? Oh, kind of caught me off guard. But I still, in my mind, I hadn't been convinced yet that she was dead serious about what she was saying. So I kind of blew it off, kept doing the things that I was doing and whatever. Then all of a sudden, it was like 3 to 4 days before rent was due. Called her back up. Hey, Big Ma, I didn't get my check. She said, did you realize what I said? I'm not paying your rent anymore. You have to figure it out. And I remember that moment that all of a sudden everything changed. See, it was no more just Charles being in college. It was Charles now. He had to be that man. He had to figure it out. He had to understand. So the first thing that I did, because I had to have a roof over my head, I went and I talked to the landlord, and I told the landlord the truth, what was going to happen, because like I said, I wanted to pay my bills. I told the landlord the situation, and he said to me, he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll give you 2 weeks. And I said, well, you give me 2 weeks, I'll have it figured out. So I already made a plan, what I needed to do, what was I going to do, just if I had to leave, get out of the place. I had to figure something out. So on my way back, I'm walking, and there's this back road at Marshall. It was called Elm Street. As I'm walking, a lot of people used to party, whatever, and, walking home to the apartments and stuff. I found $20 as I was sitting there thinking about it. And that $20 is the reason I'm sitting here able to talk to you all and tell you all about golf and life and, my experiences. When I found that $20, I was like, oh man, it was like I was rich. It's like the plan came to me. This is when I was introduced to ramen noodles. There was a place called Cub Foods. I went to Cub Foods. You can get ramen noodles, 10 of them for $1. It was like a dime a piece. I know I bought like 30 or 40 of them because what I was doing, I was supplying myself with the energy that I knew that I needed to eat. That's one thing. You got to have some food in my system. Coming up, growing up on my granddaddy's farm, I had some steaks and I had some potatoes in the boxes or whatever. So I started building the little condiments that I had to put around it. Man, I learned how to do ramen noodles with fried potatoes and everything you possibly can imagine. But I still had to wait to get finances. Now, I used to go, and I was a great pool player growing up in my granddaddy's store. So what I learned is like, you know what? I got to get out and hustle. So I grabbed my pool stick. And now it was no longer going down to the pool hall or wherever I was, the bars or whatever, and playing just to have for fun. Life changed for me. There's a saying that go, either you act on life or life will act on you. At that moment, life acted on me. It told me that I had to do something. No one was going to do it for me. And in that instant, no longer was I just playing people to learn. I made sure that the people I was playing, I was going out to win before I started. My mind was focused, my discipline. I had to get that rent. And I'll tell you what, I won't go into all the things that I did, but let me tell you what, when it came down to those 2 weeks, I ended up getting enough money to be able to pay that rent and basically pay some more. I had a contingency plan about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, and I was successful at doing it. And that became the cornerstone of where I am today and why I've written my books and talked about the game of golf and how I talk to you. And don't get me wrong. There was a point that I was absolutely fearful, totally fearful about what was going to happen to me or where I was going to end up. Was I going to have to go back home because I didn't have a place to stay? It's a thing that says or whatever, fear in itself. Fear is nothing but a false expectations appearing real. Another man who once said or whatever, feel the fear, but do it anyway. And that's the same thing. I relate that story because that's what happens to us in golf. We get to a point, when we're playing or whatever, we don't have the confidence in our swing or whatever is we doing or whatever. There are many great teachers out there that can show you many different things or whatever. But it's your responsibility as a golfer, as the one that's controlling that golf club. It's up to you to be able to have that true commitment to what you're trying to do as a golfer. There's a saying that, you hear people always say, things like, first you have to see it, believe it, to believe it. But under the shade tree, I'm telling you, first you have to believe it to see it. Because when you believe in something, then you'll begin to take it serious. And then you'll start getting better at those things that you're doing because your focus will become better. Your concentration become better. Your desire become better. Like I said, and the essence of all of this, as I'm saying or whatever, you were born to discover. You were born to discover the things and find out who you are, what you're capable of doing. And golf is one of those things or whatever will guide you so far in life. No matter how far you get down on the totem pole or whatever, the thing is, you can always lift yourself up. A man once said or whatever, you can't knock me down because I'm standing up inside myself. These are things that's what's important to you. So I'm telling you right now, every one of you out there, all of you that's under the shade tree, that's been following me for years and years and years, I appreciate and I thank you very much for that. But as I say or whatever and stuff, it's not just about what I can share with you about swinging. You have to be committed. You have to be committed to be able to be successful. Success requires commitment, and you have to give that. And I promise you, if you commit yourself to what it is you're doing, whether I'm your teacher or somebody else your teacher, if you're being committed and you're honest to yourself, I promise you, you will get the best out of your game. So always remember that. So what I'm going to do today, as far as the lesson, I'm going to talk to you about something one of my buddies at the bar, he was a very good friend of Payne Stewart's. And he and I talk about golf all the time. So what he was telling me, he's like, Charles, he said, one day we just sat around having a nice cocktail. And he said, Charles, let me tell you something about Payne Stewart. And I said, well, what you going to tell me? He said, Charles, he said, Payne Stewart felt like his arms was coming out of the socket when he was making his swing. Oh, okay, all right. But he used the word, he said, Charles, he feels like they were pulling him out of just pulled out of the socket. So, and he said, but I know you're going to put the science to it and figure it out. Yeah, of course I am. So here's the thing that I came to understand, and that's what this lesson today is about. Like I said, this one is dedicated to, my buddy Johnny O, and then what he taught me about Payne Stewart, and how it will help you to understand how you swing and what you're doing. Now, Johnny O said to me, that Payne Stewart felt like he pulled out. He pulled his arms out of his socket. But I was telling Johnny O, I said, Johnny O, when I put my science to it, science basically tells us that even though if we think we were feeling the pull, what we're actually doing is pushing. Because in the body and how the body works, if I bend my arm, the next action is straighten. If I pull something up, the next action is just pushing it down. I'm following a sequence in a sense of how it's going to go. Like I said, if I'm getting something that's close to me, I push it away from me. To get it, I have to pull it away. I have to connect something or grab it from the other side and pull it away. Anything that's going away from me is a push. So something else was a part of that as well, about getting the club in the ground and how it gets through and strike and make a divot. Well, simply, if I took my foot, if we thinking of like garden tools, and they talk about the club being a tool. If this was a spade shovel, and I was getting ready to take it in the ground, I wouldn't put my foot on top of the shovel and pull it. I would put my foot on top of the shovel and push it down into the ground. So I equate that to how we do it in the swing. So my actions that I look at is, based on anatomy, understanding that the shoulders elevate, they depress, and then they elevate. That's kind of how the swing is. So I kind of look at it because the first thing I talk about all the time, you got to get the club up in the air. So I pull the club up in the air, I push it down, and then all of a sudden the natural energy and gravity would pull it back up, or I'll pull it back up. So it's something that feels similar to this action here. I make my move. And that's what I'm really trying to do, is when I'm getting here, and I my actions, you'll learn a lot, my rolling the shaft, my dead fingers, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, striking the golf ball is what's important. So once again, when I feel that, and that's that Payne Stewart thing, and when I start feeling that, then all of a sudden I start feeling why this arc was here, where Payne made that big arc, and he was able to, boom, just absolutely, a tremendous ball striker. It was unfortunate, his passing in a sense. But, get yourself to that point to where, be committed, see it, understand it. Get up there, feel it. You know my moves. But the thing is, like I said, I want to feel like when I'm coming down to this ball, I'm just feeling like my arms are just completely being pushed out of the shoulder sockets. Pushed out of it in a sense. And if you do that, you'll start understanding a little bit more about how the arms work when you swing them. It's very important. Another part of that too, and it goes in conjunction with my dead finger grip and how I grip and what I don't change in a sense of my grip. And you'll like this as well. And a lot of this is coming in my new book, the Shade Tree Pro Swing System. Now, look at our hands for an example. When we look at our hands, look at this, this is flat, the back of the hand, and you hear all the teaching, the flat back hand and all of that. But that's something that I'm not a fan of, and I'll tell you why, because it causes manipulations. I want the golf swing to be natural. So if you take a look at my hand, when I make a fist, it makes a natural cup. So when I put my hand on there, in a sense, where people are saying that's a cup, well, cup is a good thing, because now look, that club stays square. If I cup, I turn it there, look, it's still square. It's still square to my hand. Now, the moment that I make that flat, now all of a sudden that changes. And now I got to make some kind of manipulation with my body to get that through. Now, so here's the thing is, it's kind of like Euclid said about mathematics in a sense. If it's right for one, then it's got to be right for the other. So basically, if this is cupped on here, and you've all heard everybody talk about the back of the right hand or whatever, how it's being cupped, and then they talk about a flat left hand and the back of the right hand. Well, I'm saying keep both of them cupped. Why? Because here's why. Because if we realize it, because the hand is out in front of the club face, and on the back, the right hand is on the back of the club, outside the back of the club face, then actually both sides are cupped as well. That makes that the golf club is in the middle of our hands. So all we're really doing is swinging the outside hand, you want to call it the front hand and the back hand, and the club is in the middle. Now, feeling that with that dead finger grip and understanding Payne Stewart's, letting those arms feel like they're just being pushed out of the socket, and then you sit there, and now you don't have to make any manipulations. You can just sit there and drop it down. See, it shows you what it looks like, even in the cup there. Boom. So where they think this is a manipulation or is wrong, no, this is the manipulation, because you got to make up a move. Anytime you do a move, you got to make up something to compensate for it. So let's keep it simple. Feel it there, and just drop it. Once again. There we go. Get at a try. Hey, just remember, like I said, you were born to discover. This is Charles Calhoun, aka the Shade Tree Pro, and always good golfing.